Hello and welcome to Power to the People with me, Graeme Pryce. I've become aware of a petition that is currently running recently. A petition that I think has demonstrated an interesting change in the way that information is shared in our new post-truth, post-integrity and post-decency world. The petition is worded relatively simply and gives no great detail. It just states, I would like there to be another general election. I believe the current Labour government has gone back on the promises they laid out in the lead up to the last election. Just two short, childish sentences making one massive, dumb, simple hook for a lot of dumb, simple people to hang their political ignorance on. It won't lead to a general election, obviously. That's not the way it works, and that isn't what the YouGov petition site is actually meant for. But the majority of Tory voters, Reform voters, Russian bots and idiots that have seen it mentioned in the right-wing news sources in the last few days don't know that. They're going to be disappointed. Well, the Russian bots won't be disappointed. It's pretty much gone exactly as their paymasters wanted it to. But the more dim-witted and mentally deficient among the signatories will be disappointed. There's just a few things I'd like to say about my observations of this petition. I'll share them with you right after this. I was just looking at my channel analytics and I noticed that 53% of people who watch my videos weren't subscribed. The pain. Come on, just have a quick check that you've subbed, liked and rang the bell. Make a skinny old scouser a little bit happier today. So, at the time I'm recording this, the petition has just under 2.3 million signatures. That's a suspiciously large amount in a suspiciously short period of time. But let's just have a look at some past petitions and their outcomes before we go any further. If we go back chronologically, a petition garnered approximately 1 million signatures in late 2022, basically demanding the same thing of the Tories. It was worded a little differently though. When you have somebody from the left trying to petition against a right-wing government, you get a description that's quite eloquent, like this. Call an immediate general election so that people can decide who should lead us through the unprecedented crisis threatening the UK. The chaos engulfing the UK government is unprecedented. I'd have found a different word to use there, but, you know. Over 40 ministers resigned, leaving departments without leadership during cost of living, energy and climate crises. War rages in Ukraine. The Northern Ireland Protocol has further damaged our relationship with Europe. Recession looms. The UK itself may cease to exist as Scotland seeks independence. This is the greatest set of challenges we have seen in our lifetimes. Let the people decide who leads us through this turmoil. When the right petition against the left, you get, I would like there to be another general election. I believe the current Labour governments have gone back on the promises they laid out in the lead up to the last general election. It's quite a difference there, isn't there? Anyway, Rishi Sunak responded to that petition in the same way that Keir Starmer has responded to this one. He didn't give a toss because that's not how democracy works. But if we're going to talk about petitions with large numbers, a petition in early 2019 to revoke Article 50 and remain in the EU got 6 million votes. 6 million. I don't remember GBB's running a story on that. In fact, I seem to remember quite a lot of people on the right and, you know, people who frequent GB News saying, we won, get over it. In November of 2019, a petition closed with 1.7 million signatures calling on the Tories not to illegally prorogue Parliament. As you might recall, they did it anyway and were then found to have broken the law in doing so. But, you know, Boris said we had to just move on, so yeah. In 2017, a petition calling on the UK government to refuse Donald Trump a state visit reached just under 2 million signatories. That one was mentioned on the news, if I remember correctly, but it made no difference whatsoever. You know, he still got to come and stand in front of the Queen, didn't he? Here's a big one. In 2016, somebody led a petition calling upon the government to make it so the Brexit referendum would not be called definitive if the turnout was very low and the results indecisive. That got 4.1 million votes. Barely mentioned by the media at the time, of course. 2.3 million sounds like quite a lot, doesn't it? It is quite a big number, but let's just break it down and approach it from a few angles that the Daily Mail or the fumbling Farage lickers on Twitter definitely will not. 4 million people were ignorant, uninformed, racist or gullible enough to vote for Reform UK in July. That number will have somewhat dropped after the Farage riots, of course, but I think there's still a few million of them out there, and if you speak to any of them, they think they're swelling in number. I had one guy seriously telling me yesterday that if we held a general election now as a result of this petition, 90% of the British public would back Nigel. Reform would be the next government. And he was absolutely sure of this fact as well. Didn't think he had to provide any evidence to back up his claim, because everybody he knows votes Reform. I think that says more about the intelligence levels of his social circle than it does about the British electorate. But, you know, he was sure. But let's just suppose that all of the Reform voters that can read have signed the petition. That could account for 2.3 million alone, couldn't it really? But it doesn't take into account the 7 million people that voted Conservative. That's like 11 million people, isn't it? So at that point, you're starting to think, why haven't all 11 signed the petition? Well, it wouldn't really matter anyway, because they're basically doing nothing other than declaring their already established political allegiance, aren't they? Of course, a few million people would like there to be another general election. There's at least 11 million people that voted against Labour and hate them. So 2.3 million. But let's dig a little deeper into some of the people that have signed this petition. You see, you can't find some of the names. A YouGov petition asks you for a couple of details, your name and an email address and that, you know, and it sends an email to you to check, apparently, that you are a real person. But there's no real effort made to check that you are a real person, and anybody can set up as many email addresses as they like. So, if you are some smart little dude sat in an office in Moscow, you can write a bespoke computer program that will automatically generate emails and names and continually sign that petition over and over again all day long. A smart little Russian dude can go and spend the rest of his day licking portraits of Vladimir Putin, or working on other propaganda projects to deceive the Russian people with, or talking on the phone to Nigel Farage about the smell of Donald Trump's arse. The names are quite interesting though. Apparently the whole front bench of the Labour Party has signed it, including Sir Keir himself, along with such powerful public figures as Winnie the Pooh, Wurzel Gummidge, Gandalf and the Ghost of the Queen. I think you can see what I'm alluding to here, can't you? I would never say that a system put in place to allow the public a greater voice and more democratic means of expressing that voice is a bad thing, obviously. But there's clearly some bollocks getting swung around here, isn't there? The Ghost of the Queen. We've got no way of knowing for certain just how many of those 2.3 million are bots, I suppose. But I suspect it's quite a lot, don't you? I think something else we're seeing here is an effect generated by social media and right-wing reporting that we didn't quite have with earlier petitions. Reform UK really honed their social media and bot management skills just a few short months ago during the general election, and I'm sure the relative success they garnered in that time is now fresh in whatever right-wing cesspit collectively constitutes itself as their mind. I can't bear Twitter. The sheer stupidity and backwards nature of the majority of its commenters make me despair for humanity. But I've been and had a look, and all the usual signs are there that Reform are still willing to subtly massage the stupidity and political ignorance of their fan base into believing things that those higher up in the party just know are simply untrue. Just like when they knew it was absolutely impossible for Nigel Farage to become Prime Minister, but they went ahead and subtly suggested that that was the case to millions of idiots that they knew were fed up with the Tories and had been drip-fed a diet of bullshit reasons to hate Labour for years. Hence the 4 million votes. Well, they're up to that old trick again with this, promoting the idea that signing a useless and meaningless petition could actually lead to a general election, when Farage, Tice and the other twats know that there is absolutely no way that will be the outcome. They not only don't mind lying to their supporters, but they're happy to set them up for continual disappointments as well. And let's just finish on the actual wording of the petition here. I believe the current Labour government have gone back on the promises they laid out in the lead up to the last general election. What promises? Can you be a bit more specific? There aren't any further details, so we have no idea whatsoever what this person is referring to. I suspect that he probably doesn't know himself, and if you got the guy in a room and asked him which promises he's actually referring to, the answer would be something like, well, two-tier policing, Starmer the farmer harmer, what about, well, I read about Starmer in the Mail, and I haven't actually read the manifesto, but there was promises, and he's broke them, so vote for Nigel. I think that's probably how that conversation would go, don't you? I bet whoever wrote that crappy, childish little fucking petition and set it off has got the fright of his life seeing that many millions of people signing it. It's probably one of the biggest things that's ever happened to him. If you're a Reform voter or a Tory forelock-tugging wanker, then I commend you for getting this far in this video, because you've probably gone way past gammon and turned a particularly petulant shade of purple by now. But I have got a final statement that I'd like you to think on. There's 66 million people in this country, and we already know that over 11 million of them voted Tory or Reform. So don't get too excited that just over 2 million of them have signed the most childishly written petition in recent history. My suggestion would be to maybe wait and see if you can confirm that 52% of the electorate have signed it. Maybe come back then. Until then, we won. Get over it. Thank you for watching if you've gotten this far. I think this just basically proves that the YouGov petition site has run its course. It's far too open to interference. It was never intended to be a serious political tool anyway. It was set up by the Tories to give the impression that they were a caring, listening government when, as the last 14 years proved, they were anything but. We've seen the worst inequality this country has ever known increase exponentially during their time in office. People are angry, poor, annoyed, and in many cases, heavily propagandised and seriously indoctrinated. They've been convinced to vote against their own interests over and over again, and twats like Farage are entirely willing to make sure they continue to do so, while they are constantly bombarded with right-wing lies, gaslighting and pathetic smear campaigns. Labour haven't broken the promises. They haven't even had time to keep them yet. If somebody promised you they'd see you on Friday, you wouldn't accuse them of breaking the promise if you hadn't seen them by Thursday, would you? This petition doesn't demonstrate the will of the people. It demonstrates the depth of political naivety and the hypocritical ignorance of some of the people. But it doesn't demonstrate the will of the people. Say something about the right-wingiest of knobheads in this country, but not much more than that. Anyway, if you want to support the channel, there are links to all the ways of doing so below, along with the join button for memberships. But just hitting the like and subscribe button is a massive help, and I would really appreciate it if you would do that, if you haven't already. Now, that isn't all I've got to say, but it is as much of what I've got to say as I'm going to say today. Ta-ra-la. I would like there to be another general election. I believe the current Labour government has gone back on the promises they laid out. Blah, 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 blah. Blah. Whoa, getting a bit carried away there.